Listen closely as we open a file long buried beneath the concrete and forgotten aspirations of 1980s South Korea. The economic miracle was casting its long, deceptive shadow, and hidden within that darkness was a terrifying bureaucracy built on absence. This is the story of Incheon, a port city bustling with commerce, which became ground zero for a crime against humanity: the systematic harvesting of children. They weren't just lost, they were engineered out of existence. Imagine a child's laughter, abruptly silenced, replaced only by the rustle of falsified paperwork. The system didn't save these children, it consumed them, feeding a global demand fueled by dollars and desperation. The orphanage, meant to be a sanctuary, became the chilling operational hub for international human trafficking, disguised under the veil of charity and humanitarian aid. Feel the cold air. The truth often hides where the light dares not reach.
In the decades following the Korean War, adoption became a massive, state-sanctioned industry. South Korea supplied more children to Western countries than any other nation, normalizing the idea that poverty necessitated relinquishment. But by the 1980s, the supply of genuine orphans dwindled, while the demand and the corresponding financial incentives exploded. This imbalance created a fertile breeding ground for corruption. Orphanages, once institutions of last resort, morphed into pipelines for profit. We must understand the atmosphere of shame and destitution that clung to many peripheral urban and rural areas. A system designed to protect the vulnerable now actively sought them out, viewing impoverished mothers not as people to support, but as necessary weak links in a highly lucrative chain. The whispers started small, localized rumors of missing infants and coerced signatures, dismissed as mere gossip in the relentless pursuit of modernization.
The Incheon orphanage, physically imposing and perpetually silent, was presented to the outside world as a model facility. But behind the cold facade, the business model was simple and monstrous: acquire children, fabricate histories, and secure payment. The administrators, working in conjunction with brokers, didn't wait for children to be abandoned. They hunted for them. Targeting the poorest districts, they exploited families facing extreme hardship, perhaps offering small amounts of money under false pretenses, or leveraging debt and shame. Imagine the terror: agents arriving under the guise of welfare workers, yet acting like vultures, circling newborns and toddlers. The coercion was subtle, psychological, relying on the desperation of parents who believed their child would starve if they held on to them, or worse, that they were granting their child a better life, not realizing they were signing their future away to traffickers.
The most chilling aspect of the Incheon operation was not the kidnapping itself, but the meticulous, bureaucratic erasure that followed. Once a child was acquired, whether through coercion or outright theft, their original identity had to vanish. Birth records were systematically altered, erased, or completely fabricated. Healthy children were often listed as having debilitating illnesses, or parents were recorded as deceased or unknown. This sophisticated forgery operation turned living, named children into anonymous foundlings, instantly eligible for international adoption. The pen was wielded like a surgical instrument, cleanly severing the connection between parent and child. This paper genocide was necessary to satisfy the strict requirements of American and European adoption agencies, who demanded a clean narrative of abandonment or absolute orphanage status. The records themselves became ghosts, documents detailing lives that never existed. For the children inside the orphanage, the experience was one of sterile neglect and constant waiting. These facilities operated with minimal oversight, creating an environment where mistreatment was rampant, ensuring the children were malleable and eager for change. The staff often kept them in minimal conditions, reinforcing the narrative for visiting foreign agencies that the children were being rescued from squalor, thus justifying the urgent need for relocation. This emotional calculus was cruel and effective. Imagine being a child, isolated and confused, watched by adults who saw you not as a vulnerable life, but as an export commodity, a package awaiting shipment. They were stripped of their culture, their language, and their fundamental memory of their first family, all in preparation for a new life thousands of miles away, a life built on a lie whispered into the mouths of well-meaning foreign barons.
The adoption brokers played the role of high-stakes salespeople. They traveled between Korea and the West, painting a rosy picture of humanitarian rescue while negotiating exorbitant fees. The money flowed in a thick, murky stream. Processing fees, travel expenses, administrative costs, all inflated. A portion of these funds lined the pockets of the orphanage directors and the corrupt officials who looked the other way. This was not charity, it was transactional exploitation disguised as salvation. The receiving parents, often desperate and emotionally invested, were given only carefully curated information. They believed they were adopting an orphan, unaware that the child's mother might be living just a few kilometers away, grieving and searching daily. The entire operation relied on geographical distance and a vast cultural gap to successfully bury the crime. The scandal finally began to unravel not through official investigation, but through the enduring suspicion of the families left behind. Mothers who were told their babies died, yet never saw a body. Fathers who reluctantly signed papers they didn't fully understand, only to realize later the true permanence of their action. These seeds of doubt grew into a relentless search. In the late 80s, journalists and activists started compiling disparate reports of missing children in the Incheon area. They encountered walls of denial, manipulated documents, and threats, yet the sheer volume of cases became undeniable. It's often the small, mundane details that break a systemic cover-up: a misspelled name, a date that contradicts hospital records, the memory of a unique birthmark that didn't match the file description. The paper trail, meant to hide the crime, eventually became the key to unlocking the truth, revealing the systematic fraud at the heart of the adoption machine. When the initial reports hit the press, the response from the institutions involved, both Korean and international, was a swift, coordinated attempt at damage control. They framed the accusations as misunderstandings, exaggerations born of grief, or isolated incidents of administrative error. But the evidence was overwhelming. Multiple children from the same vulnerable families were recorded as abandoned years apart, and children known to have living parents were shipped overseas. The government faced an uncomfortable choice: expose a massive, systemic criminal enterprise that embarrassed the nation on the global stage, or minimize the scope of the atrocity. Predictably, they chose the latter. Investigations were brief and shallow, records were lost, and key personnel were allowed to vanish quietly into retirement. Justice, if it could be called that, was bureaucratic and non-committal. The fallout of the Incheon scandal has echoed across generations. For the birth families, the pain is permanent. The knowledge that their child was stolen and raised in a foreign land, often without ever knowing their origins. Their search is complicated by the very documents that created the fraud. For the adoptees, now adults, they struggle with questions of belonging, language, and culture, constantly haunted by the possibility that their real parents are still out there, searching. This trauma is intergenerational, impacting their adoptive families, who must reconcile the love they hold for their child with the dark origins of their adoption. To this day, accountability remains elusive. While some brokerage firms faced mild regulatory action, few truly high-ranking officials or orphanage directors faced severe punishment, commensurate with the crime of child trafficking. The Korean government, sensitive to international perception, preferred institutional silence over painful public reckoning. This lack of true justice means that the systems that allowed the Incheon scandal to flourish were never fully dismantled, only reformed on the surface. We are left with the lingering, horrifying implication that this wasn't an anomaly, but a necessary component of the high-speed adoption machine. The victims are still seeking full transparency, still demanding access to the unredacted files that hold the key to their original lives. The names and faces of the perpetrators remain protected by time and systemic apathy. The Incheon scandal serves as a stark, terrifying reminder that humanitarian causes, when mixed with high finance and governmental oversight, can easily decay into exploitation. It highlights the devastating potential of bureaucracy when it prioritizes economic output and national image over human integrity. We close this chapter, but the ghost of the Incheon orphanage lingers, a cold monument to the stolen identities and the broken lives scattered across continents. Every falsified document represents a severed bond, a future irrevocably changed. The children are now adults, but they carry the burden of their stolen past, a silent accusation against the systems that failed them. The true horror lies not in what was done, but in how easily the world allowed it to happen, turning a blind eye to the cries drowned out by the noise of progress. The shadows cast by the 1980s are long, and the questions remain heavy. How many more children were taken? How many more families are still searching? The truth is often painful, but it must be uncovered for healing to begin. We owe it to the stolen children of Incheon to remember their story and to demand perpetual vigilance against institutionalized corruption. If this dark chapter of history resonated with you, and you seek to uncover the silent crimes that shape our world, please take a moment to acknowledge the lost. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more updates and deep dives into the dark corners of history. Share your thoughts below, but tread carefully in the memory of the disappeared.